everyone. My name is Michelle Snyder. I'm one of the consultants here at the Center for Healthy Churches. I lead the nonprofit arm of our work, which is called CHC-PneuMatrix, and I'm also the team lead for our organizational development work, which is pretty much anything related to helping the church be its best. We're glad you joined us for this series that we're calling The Future Ready Church. Take a deep dive into what it looks like for a church to tackle some of these strategic questions in order to help them just be their best for kind of to be the church that the world needs today. So with me today, I have several of my esteemed colleagues who are experts at what we're talking about. In this episode, what we're talking about is what we've called Where Are We? Taking a clear look at reality. So basically today, we're asking, how do we get started? Once you've got an idea, once you've discerned the idea, what kind of assessment do you need to do of your environment, and how do you do that? So we've got with us Bill Owen, who's a longtime Baptist pastor from Nashville, Tennessee. Bill has three sons, two of whom are pastors. So Bill must have set a pretty good example for them. He's got a lovely wife who is an amazing cook, and he's got the best backyard porch and pool that I have maybe ever seen. Also, more importantly for this conversation, he's done a ton of this kind of work of helping churches ask the right questions about where they are. He's probably done as much of it as anyone on our team has done. So welcome, Bill. And then we have Guy Sayles. Guy lives in Asheville, North Carolina, where he most recently pastored before retirement, but he's also a coach, a consultant, has been a professor. He's one of our most popular blog post writers at the Center for Healthy Churches. And I hear that you're working on a book about discernment as we speak. Is that right, Guy?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay,
Happy
stay
to get
tuned.
started. Happy to get started on that.
Yeah. So welcome, Guy.
Thank you.
So we're all pretty clearly in good hands as we tackle this question. So let me just ask the first question. I just started a doctoral program actually in missional leadership, and my professor in this program says that the real question of mission, and I might say mission, missiology, ecclesiology, vision work, I think it's all part of the same bucket, right? The real question is what is God up to in the world, and how are we being invited to participate? I love that question. I think it centers the question correctly. What is God up to in the world, and how are we being invited to participate? And what it suggests is that the first question we ask is, what is God up to? Or another way to say it is, where are we? What's our starting point here in some ways? So I'm wondering if each of you can just unpack a little bit um, what makes that question so challenging? What are the challenges and dimensions to that question? So Guy, if you want to get us started.
Yeah, and I hope that the answer isn't going to sound too simplistic, though I hope it's simple in one way. And part of the way I think about this is that God is up to the same things in the world that God is always up to
Mm,
in the world, which is
Mm.
liberation, reconciliation, demonstrating steadfast love, welcoming, um, healing, and the question then becomes, if since God is up to those things in the world that God has always been up to in the world, and from my perspective, those are seen most clearly in Jesus. The question is where, and how do we see where? And so that's the challenging part of this for me. I assume that God is doing those things, and I assume that God is especially doing those things in the places where Jesus spent most of his time, which would be with those who've been shoved to the margins or left at the margins, people who've been excluded, people who are left out or left behind culturally and economically, spiritually. So I think a place to look for where God is at work is to look among the disenfranchised, if you will, the people that Jesus spent a great deal of his time with. And an invitation and a challenge for a lot of the churches that I've been a part of is that those people tend not to be in the congregation on a regular basis. And I think that's an indictment of our congregations. So part of discerning where God's at work in the world is to go where those folks are and not do for them, but be with them, and to hear where God is already at work with them. So that's part of my answer, is that God is doing what God has done, and God is doing it with the people, with all people. But if we want to get live witnesses of that, then I think we have to spend time with the people who are on the margins. I think we also encounter what God is doing in the beauty of creation and the beauty of the arts. I think we encounter God in worship, of course, at the table. So that's an initial answer, is that God's doing what God has done.
So not only is that not an overly simplistic answer, it made me tear up for
Mm,
reasons that I don't even know why, but it's a good
mm,
sign that it's a substantive answer. And also it's unbelievably meaty. What I'm struck by, and I think I'm hearing you say, tell me if I'm not, but what I'm struck by when you say what you just said is that the challenge of that is, number one, we're not really connected, at least in my church spaces in the main line, and I'm Presbyterian Church USA, but we're not really connected to those living on the margins, and so it's hard to know what God's up to when we're not in the places that God might normally
yeah,
be. I also heard you say that that it that we have a challenge not trying to fix, but instead it's easier to like offer services. It's easier to sort of swoop in with our food programs than it is to be with people. And that's a challenging, that's part of the challenge. Is that
yeah.
fair
Oh,
perception?
absolutely. I mean, I think our eyes become more open, our ears become more open when we are with people rather than simply doing for people. Surely there are gifts the church might have to give, but there are gifts for the church to receive, as well, from
Yeah.
people on the
One
margin.
final thing I heard you say that was challenging is that sometimes we try to make this too hard. At least that's a good word for me as a visioner. We're not starting from zero. Like there are really only a few things. God is up to the work of liberation, reconciliation, and healing at all
Yeah,
times. Always.
yeah,
It's never
always.
it's never more, but it's never less. And so how
Yeah.
do yeah. Bill, what would you say is your answer to the question? What do you think makes this challenge?
Well, so we've thought about the question's so simple and straightforward. Where are we? So if that's where, then I think that we need to recognize that there are multiple we's
Mm, mm,
within the
Hmm.
congregation. So where are we? It depends on who you ask.
mm, mm,
Leadership may be feeling one thing in the church
Mhm.
that you call home. Long timers, another.
mm,
Newer folks who've just come in recently, maybe something totally different from the rest. So the act of asking the question is as much about us as it is about God and the alignment between the two, which makes it a spiritual practice, doesn't
mm,
it? That kind of practice cultivates the kind of trust that's going to be necessary in any kind of visioning enterprise. Uh, that, as a longtime pastor, that is not easy work,
Mhm.
getting the we's together. Uh, but
mm,
it is generative work. It's inspiring. I have never, in all the years that I've been doing this kind of congregational coaching, I'm never uh, I've never called people together around tables to have meaningful conversations when it wasn't energizing and life-giving to the body. Uh, in fact, more times than not, people come out of those experiences saying, we need to do this more often.
mm,
And if I could be pastor all over again, I would do more of that,
mm,
asking those questions and having those conversations. What should we do?
It strikes me, Bill, that as one of the episodes in this series is on like when visioning work is really conflict, like or what about when it's conflict. And I am right with you. When you get all the we's in the same room, we've got different starting points, we've got different objectives, we've got different needs. Like all that intersection is a challenging place to live, and we all start with our own assumptions about where we're starting from.
Yeah, and that's not even to begin to address the larger we, the cultural situation that we're in, which is our situation. And every church has to, every generation has to do that work. And we find ourselves in a time of accelerated change, to say the least. And so people like Ryan Burge are a tremendous gift to the church and to
Yeah.
country, really, helping us understand what is happening around us. Uh, and we all know we've seen the statistics. The American church is in decline. It's been especially true in younger generations, though there's some encouraging signs among millennials of late. And so, I guess I would say to those of you who are perhaps on some leadership team, or that this isn't just a membership issue. It's a cultural moment in our country and our world, really, that challenges and raises good questions about the way we do church, about membership, about influence, about relevance. And I think we need to lean into those conversations.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the question that I've asked is what makes this, where are we so challenging? And it's just maybe it's not every church. I don't need to be global, but most of the churches we walk into, we are dealing with the starting point of a memory of a past church that was more robust than the one we're in today,
Mhm.
and a sense of loss about that, a desire to find our way back, whatever back means. And so part of the challenge is sort of trying to swim through all of that nostalgia to get people to a place where they can say 2025,
Mhm.
it's not you, First Baptist Asheville, North Carolina. It's it's you, Church of America. It's us, um, people of Jesus Christ who are in a new day, in a new age. God is always up to new things. And so most of us are aware, but I don't know if the viewers are aware, that there's an author named Phyllis Tickle who wrote a book, Emerging Christianity, who argues that every 500 years the church has a giant rummage sale, and that we are in that. We call it Reformation, and about every 500 years it happens, and that's not bad, but at the micro level, it's a pretty hard thing to sort of navigate. So yeah, good, good, good.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah,
If
sure, please do, Bill.
if you're on a visioning team, or if leadership, if you're trying to rethink, where do we go from here? You can get stuck here because there's so much data out there.
Yeah.
So much. And so I think one of the things that you have to do, you obviously you want the data. You want to know what you don't know about the community that you serve in. I mean, asking the question, who is our neighbor, is a real question. Um, but you also at the same time cult I would encourage you to cultivate a safe and honest place where people can say, here's what I see. Here's
Mhm.
what I'm hearing from God. I would say use this as an opportunity to listen for what God may be saying to your church through the many voices in the room. It
Mhm.
is discernment. It's
Mhm.
discernment. There's more than one right answer. Uh, yeah.
That's good. It's good.
Yeah, and I would add to that, not every person and not every congregation is called to do everything that God is doing in the world.
Right.
You know,
Right.
someone said to me years ago, and I can't remember who, our invitation is to take hold of the near edge of the world's challenges. You know, so wherever those challenges meet us in our community, our congregation, at the intersection of our giftedness and sense of calling and capabilities as a church. Just take the near edge and work on those things, and other people will be doing that too.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a great line. Like where's the near edge?
I
It's
need
like
to remember who it was so I can give them credit for it, but it's been really helpful to me.
well,
Yeah.
Mother Teresa certainly got it right. It's the person in front of you,
Yeah,
right?
there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. One of our colleagues is a pastor who says that my church's call is to the 3 mile radius in every direction.
Mhm.
You know, depending on the community that you're in, you could bump
Right.
up against a bunch of near edges in a 3 mile radius.
Absolutely.
But it's another way of talking about
Mhm.
how we, you know, what's right in front of us. Yeah. So let me ask this. It seems to me, and I think in the work that I do, I would say that where we are and what God is up to has both external to the church elements and internal to the church elements. What is God up to among us inside the walls, and what's God up to outside of the walls? So I wonder, Guy, if you can talk a little bit about what it looks like to do an internal assessment in order to get a clear story about where we are, what God is up to.
One of the interesting things about where this question goes for me is when I first thought about an internal assessment, I thought about internal to me.
Uh-huh.
And I was asking myself, what do I need to be and do in order to be the kind of person who can see and hear and feel what Jesus is up to in my own congregation, in my own life, then my congregation, then my community. So what the internal phrase meant to me at first is, I have the opportunity, really the obligation to continue my own growth, transformation into Christ-likeness so that I can see and hear and feel the way he does in the church and in the community. So that's where I went first, was to the idea of internal, internal
Yeah.
to me,
Yeah.
and to invite other people to continue on that same journey too, so that our eyes are clearer. That Huxley phrase, cleanse the doors of perception, so I can see the windows of perception. So anyway, that's where I went first.
Before you move from that, let me ask that question then in that way. What does it look like to internally, what was the phrase, clear the windows of perception?
Yeah, clear the windows of
Yeah,
perception. Yeah.
how does one do that? What does that look
Well, some of it depends on temperament, but it has to do with practices, what we sometimes call disciplines, but that has connotations that often people don't resonate with. Just practices of withdrawing from the noise into quiet, practices of withdrawing from distraction to attention, from kind of ugliness to beauty. Whatever it takes for us to pay attention to what's happening in us and around us, that invites us into God's story. And
And let me repeat, or let me just sort of remind us that what we're talking about is a communal process. And
right,
and
right.
and probably a lot of our viewers are pastors. And so the question that you're raising is, how do we create silence for our people? How do we create the space to hear? How do
Yeah.
we integrate practices for people in order to do that internal work? And we're doing a whole episode actually on discernment. I
Oh,
think
good.
that's part of what it is,
Yeah.
but you're right that it is
Well,
this question, where are we? Yeah. What'd you say, Bill?
it's an essential shift that has to take place. You certainly don't discount uh, what was it, was it Watchman Nee? I'm channeling back to something has to die in me first,
Yeah,
for God's will to be done, that kind of holy indifference thing.
yeah, yeah,
But it's a shift from I to we. But I think you have to start with I.
yeah.
Then we
Mhm.
have to collectively, as a congregation, move to what is God speaking to us about the people who surround us as a congregation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to be persuaded that my listening is more valuable than my talking.
Yes.
That kind of thing. So that's where I went initially in
Yeah.
terms. I think a visioning process or trying to discern what God is up to in our church or in the world is an invitation too, just to revisit what our identity is, our identity as a congregation. And this is another one of those things that we sometimes make too complicated.
Yeah. Yep.
But just simply to reaffirm in whatever language and images are appropriate to that local congregation that we're a community of Jesus followers who are engaged in, use whatever words, worship and relationship and mission, just to revisit that sense of identity. That seems to me to be a collective version of being prepared to see and hear, because we're looking for signs of where we are in harmony with that identity and where we're not, so that we can do both. We can deal with both. Another thing that I would say, this is kind of random, is I would look for where the energy is, because our tendency, and this is a little bit like appreciative inquiry, but it's look for where the energy and the life is. And I would say, listen for where the laughter is, where the joy is, because in every congregation, there are people who have a kind, and it's really hard to describe, a kind of, I don't know, almost a divine restlessness. They're wanting something to happen, and it's not resulting in complaining. It's resulting in questing, asking questions about, and there's energy there. And when they discover something, there tends to be a sense of joy and laughter. So I would pay attention to that rather than to where I don't want to ignore the hand wringing, but I want to pay attention to where the energy and life and joy are. And one more random thing, one of my favorite little books that's ostensibly for children, but like most children's books, is really for adults. It's called Big Panda and Tiny Dragon. And Big Panda asks the question, which is more important, the journey or the destination? And Tiny Dragon says, the company. Paying attention to the quality of relationships inside a church actually has the capacity to help us notice where relationships are possible outside. So that's where I would start.
That's all great stuff, Guy. It's great stuff. Back to my thing about the nostalgia. I think oftentimes in this visioning can be a veneer for how do we get more young people, right?
Yeah.
And one of the questions that I hear in your sort of ideas is asking who's here. Like not only where is the energy, but who has been attracted to what we're doing? Who is the company, and how do we lean into what we have instead of what we don't have?
Right.
And do that with, I don't know. It's the starting point, right?
Yeah.
Better do it more deeply into God's call. Ask new questions of how we do what we're doing. Again, we begin again. But yeah, the first question is who's here, and where is the energy? That's really good. Yeah, Bill, what about externally? How do you do this kind of assessment of where we are and what God's up to, external to the church walls? Where does a pastor or a team start?
Well, when we turn our attention, our gaze outward, I often encourage churches to take a holy curiosity approach to it. Most churches think they know the community or the neighborhood that they find themselves in, but they really don't know what they don't know. One, because change has been happening so quickly in most places across America. And we assume we know, but we don't know. So study your neighborhood, look out the window, so to speak. It can be easy to just relate and know and move in circles of those with whom you're most comfortable. So I once worked with a church. It was just on the edge of the inner city. And so they were, in essence, in the city, that realized during this conversation that here they were sitting right in the middle of a neighborhood that was just undergoing massive change, demographic change, economic, and almost in every level. And there were families around them. There were young kids around them, uh, many from immigrant backgrounds, but their programming was still 1980s, or it was back in the day. So uh, that was a splash of cold water in the face, and kind of awakened them. So I would say, yeah, you look at the trends certainly, but better I think it is to talk to the people. And so I encourage folks to take neighborhood walks, to go out in groups of 12 or 15, walk up and down the streets that surround them, and meet their neighbors and ask them questions about who they are and where they're from and what they do, and walk into shops, etc., and meet people. What are their challenges? What are their hopes? They can be quite informative, and I've never ever done one where people were not just struck by God's presence in those conversations, and the new connections that were being made and relationships. Obviously, those things were invaluable. So, to go back to where we began, this really is seeing our work and now our community through the lens of mission. Uh, it's it, uh, it's easy to react to the change that is around us, but what if you engage with the change and the people around us to discern where the Spirit may be inviting us as a congregation to participate in this new mission by, as we said, just joining what God's already doing in the community around us? Where is God already at work in our circle of influence? And like you said, about that one church, it might be a 1 mile radius. It might be a 2 mile radius. It may be that you'll be the church for the city. But you do you. This church that I began with, who kind of opened their eyes to the neighborhood they were in, their thing on their website, if I remember correctly, was a church in the city. And they changed it to a church in the city and for the city.
I hoped that's where you were going. Yeah.
And I thought, all right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that very, very practical, concrete exercise of doing a walkabout, right? My husband's a pastor, and we are having all these same conversations that every other church is having. And I said to him, like that ball field, we've never used that ball field, which is directly across the street from the church. I mean, I could stand in the portico and hit this ball field with a baseball, and I have a terrible arm. And and he said, "What ball field?" And it was like, he's not so much with the balls. He doesn't, he says he's never willingly touched a ball in his whole life. But so he's not inclined to look at that. But it just struck me. He's been driving past this ball field for 14 years, and it's not the first thing in his mind. So these walkabouts are really, really help us see the thing that we don't see. And I think internal too. I worked with a church once. We did a walk about the building. I mean, we do that a lot in the church I work with, but one of them had a sign in their narthex that advertised a nursery that hadn't existed for 7 years. And nobody saw the sign. Like, it was just absolutely invisible to them. So, she or he with eyes to see, let them see. It seems to me that developing eyes to see is a really important first step. So, yeah, thanks for saying that, Bill. So I'm curious, people who have done this work many, 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 many times, do you have good examples? Do you have examples of churches where their assessment of what was going on in their community, internal or external, effectively shifted their vision in a direction, or sort of was the percolation that they needed to do the work? Do we have good examples of that?
So let me tell you about that church that I just briefly mentioned.
Yeah.
That started this church in the city and then became for the city.
Yeah.
We held these listening circles, listening sessions, but they were groups of 8 to 10 folks, and not really to try to fix anything, but just to ask the question, what's God doing here, around us, in us, among us, in our neighbors' lives? And that simple practice changed the tone and the tenor of the question, of the
Mm.
moment, really, in the life of the church. So instead of despair, the people started seeing evidence, glimpses of life and God, around them. So opportunity, and just simply as a result, I mean, this is appreciative in its very nature. They began to notice this energy in the room and among them. And one of the surprising places was, this is right in a concrete jungle. I mean, this is right on the edge of a major city, and so it was all concrete and buildings around them. And so their parking lot was really what was there. And so they held their first annual medical clinic.
Mm.
And it was a small outreach project the first time. Since then, they've done it every year now, sometimes twice a year, and it is like a carnival. Uh, and so quietly, their neighborhood church, uh, I say neighborhood, urban, their concrete surface became a hub. It became a hub for neighbors, gathering, for children playing, volunteering, partnerships with nonprofits now who come in and set up there. It's become the place, to form this kind of community, really, and resource, to people who lived right there within walking distance. So uh, they let that simple insight of listening to one another, and looking out through the window, so to speak, around them, what's going on here, to begin this kind of community engagement, which was transformative. And so even their Sunday mornings now are more outward focused than inward focused because of that experience. They're not they're not a mega church, in terms of numbers, but they're more focused and more joyful and more connected
Missional.
to God and their neighbors, more missional. So they are for the community now, not just in the city.
Wow, that's a great story.
Yeah,
It's a wonderful story.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's an African American church that just said, we're going to do something.
Mm.
That's wonderful.
Wow. Wow. Really good. Guy, do you have one?
Uh, I do. One thing I want to say, sort of out of my experience at First Baptist Asheville years ago, was it's right in the middle of downtown Asheville, and there's the only residential component there are Section 8 housing and housing for elder adults, and increasingly now high-end condominiums. So it's a very diverse neighborhood. And so part of what we did was to do that kind of neighborhood walk, but those walks, and that was a practice of mine. But another thing that I found very helpful, and this is why I'm telling this story, is I tried to get us to form relationships with leaders of other nonprofits
Mm.
that were working on issues that were about liberation and justice and mercy and feeding and the least of these, to learn what challenges they were seeing, and not so much for the purpose of our going away and doing something ourselves like what they were doing, but how can we do this together? Let's figure out how we can do this together and not worry so much about who gets the credit. It doesn't have to have a name on it that says First Baptist Church did this, but we just joined with the partnership there. So I want to. This is not the church I'm about to mention is not one that I worked with directly, but I've been so impressed by and learned a great deal from St. Martin in the Field in London.
Mm.
The fellow who is the rector vicar there is Sam Wells, who was for 10 years the the minister of the university, the dean of the chapel at Duke. He came from England to Duke and went back to England. And it is remarkable. That church is right in the middle of the city. It's right on Trafalgar Square. And they've always been known for inviting people in for wonderful music, and they still do that. But they have literally turned that church inside out by what Sam calls just going to the edge and asking, how can we be a blessing to our neighbors? How can we bless our neighbors, whoever they are, and how can we join in a partnership? So that he has written about this in a book, A Future Bigger Than the Past, or something like that is the title of it. But it's really a roadmap to how one church did this and how that process can be replicated. It's very much focused on discernment. So they now have a cafeteria where they intentionally employ people from outside the congregation. And when I was there recently in London, and I went in, and there were two Muslim women wearing their attire, serving as waitresses, alongside young people fully tatted and pierced, serving as waiters and waitresses. It's just powerful. Over and over again, I found ways that he and they were turning the church inside out. There's a website if people want to know more about it. It's just called heartedge.org. And I just love the idea of how can we turn inside out and ask, how can we bless the people who are here? It's an extension of that question you were asking, Michelle, about inside, who's here, and then outside, who's here? How can we bless them, partner with them, befriend them, be with them? And it takes organizational form and individual.
Once again, simplicity takes the day.
Yeah.
What a great vision. Well, good conversation. I could continue on for many hours, but our listeners are busy people. So thank you for your time today, both Bill and Guy. Also, thank you to those who've watched and been with us. We're grateful for the opportunity to think with you about this thing that occupies our days, which is helping churches participate in God's call in the most effective and imaginative ways possible. We hope that you've heard some advice or insights that you've found helpful. We love it when folks like you call us and ask us to journey with you. We've got some consultants who are experts at what they do and really deep wells. And so if you ever need assistance with long-range planning or conflict or dreaming together and imagining what God is up to in the world, please don't hesitate to reach out to us through our website at churches.org. Thank you so much, and peace as you journey.